I'll show you the black page real quick, just to show you where everything is. So this is our Blackboard page. So to get to everything that I'm going to show you today, I'm covering a lot of stuff today. So to get to everything, you guys screen. You should see now week 1 and 2, the diagnostic. That's past us now. The video from last week's is in here though, if you haven't watched it yet. That's this intro to rhetoric, logic, and sentence combining. So that's what I was going to do with you all last week. So that's what I did for this video I made for the Monday class prior. So if you haven't watched that yet, give it a go. But now we're starting the first paper, the personal narrative. If you click this, folder, you see here that I give you daily instructions for the module. So I talk about for the classes of August 31st, September 1st. Well, talk about what we're going to cover today. September the 4th, this Friday, you're going to have some discussion posts to do. I'll show you what that is in a moment. Next week, we're going to start working on another module at the same time as this one. That doesn't involve any writing. That's a short logic module. But as you guys work through that, as you guys work on through your papers, that'll be the new content I'm covering starting next week. By the 11th of September, you guys should have a draft ready to go for your papers for peer review. So on Blackboard, at least, the class is bigger than what it is when we meet here, because you guys share the same shell with the Monday class. So you'll even see some names on Blackboard that you might not see otherwise. I think that's good, just because it gives you more people's work to look at. So next Friday, the 11th, I'm asking for your drafts. And then, as you see, I'll give you that whole weekend to peer review your drafts. And then after that, you can take up to the 18th, on the Friday after that on the 18th, to get your paper in. So that'll be when the paper will be actually due. So I'm asking for a draft a week before you turn it in. But I do that with the hope that you will revise according to your feedback you get. You can also, that whole week after that, you can also schedule a meeting with me, and I'll be happy to read over your paper, and we can chat about it one-on-one about what you need to do. We can do that on Zoom or over the phone or Skype or whatever you want to do. The only thing I won't do is I won't give you written feedback before the paper's due, because it's just much easier for me just to give you verbal feedback than it is written feedback. Okay, so if you do want feedback on your paper before you turn it in, you'll have to meet with me one-on-one to do it. Okay.
Does it say how long the draft has to be?
Yeah, as you'll see in the prompt I'm going to give you in a second. The paper is going to be 3 to 4 pages. That'll be how long your first paper is going to be. It's 3 to 4 pages. Okay.
What's a draft?
Hold on a second. That's the bad thing about using my MacBook. Okay. So a draft is your first is the first time you write the paper. Okay. So you go through multiple drafts leading up to the final copy that you submit to me.
So you just write the paper, then make edits to it.
Yeah, the first draft, I know the first draft, you should never worry about the paper being perfect or anything like that. You usually just want to make sure that you just get something down on paper. And then you're going to submit your paper to get feedback from your fellow students. You can also ask for feedback from me if you meet with me that week before the paper's due. Like I said, I'm going to go over the paper more in a second, but it's going to be 3 to 4 pages long as far as length goes. Okay.
Do you want us to upload, to submit it on the first draft, and then do it again to submit the final draft?
Yeah, you're going to submit a first draft, right? You're going to do that on the discussion forum.
Oh, not do the upload assignment.
Yeah, the first draft will be on the discussion forum, and then your final copy will be on the Dropbox. All this stuff's here. So the prompt I'm getting ready to go over in a second here. I have some video. I have some videos up here. You see in this video that I made for yesterday's class. I'll post the video for this class right after class here. I also have a video up from an online class on how to write a narrative. So I have all kinds of materials up for you here, including our class for today. I'm going to go over a couple of handouts today: descriptive and figurative language, avoiding cliches, brainstorming topics, and Ryan, you'll get to hear the PACT again from me today. So you'll get some reinforcement there. Already heard it once already. And then for your first 2 posts for Friday, you see that these are up here. So you're going to have 2 of these for Friday. One is going to be on reviewing some narratives from some professional great writers, right? Great writers. So I'm giving you 2 narratives to read over: The Serpent's Paradise and On Fishing. And I give you some questions to address. You should pick one of the 2 and then answer these questions. Give me more than a yes or no answer when you do these. Be thorough about your responses. Give me specific examples from the works to prove to answer the questions. So, for example, did the writer incorporate vivid description that paints a picture for the reader? Why were you drawn to it? Give a specific example. So, how did the writer pace the narrative? Who's the ideal audience? I'd like to see you break down all this as far as one of these 2 pieces, whichever piece that you gravitated to more. And if you click this in the folder, it'll take you to the link where you can go to the discussion forum and create your thread. Okay. So I'd like to see you do this, then read over somebody else's. See if you can contribute any thoughts to somebody else's. I don't want to see you saying, I agree with you. All right, that's the one thing I don't want to see. There's lots of, the bad thing about taking this class online is you have to deal with these discussion forums. All right, I know they're not fun. I know people type a bunch of bullshit into them all the time. All right, give them your all. Right. They will be what you make them to be. So if you read over somebody's posts and you want to say something, add something to the conversation, do so. That's great. And that establishes a sense of community in a class like this. If we were meeting in person, the sense of community would be you guys would see each other. Well, we don't see each other except on camera. So something like this tool helps establish that sense of community, which is important. But you have that post, then you have another post for Friday. These are on some sample student essays. So these are essays that students have written for me. I give you the exact same questions, answer about those. Okay. One is called family, the other one's called a time of uncertainty, and the other one's called alone. You can click the link here. It'll take you to do that post too. You know, as you guys will see, I will just tell you one thing: the family essay is pretty hairy. Right? So if you're easily disturbed, I would do the other two, just because the family essay is really messed up. Okay, just let you know that ahead of time. It's a good essay, but it's really disturbing. Then you see here, the next thing we'll do in the module will be for Friday the 11th. And that day, you're going to do a grammar review already. So if you watch the video from last week, we're going to talk about sentence combining. That's going to be part of this grammar review. I'm going to do a little bit more today too. So you could probably actually take this thing after class today if you want to work ahead. Now, there's also a video up for the online class that I made on combining sentences, so you can get that spiel here too. There is the peer review thread is up. So next week, whenever you do the peer review, so when you post your papers, you're going to respond to at least 2 of your peers. I gave you 10 questions to answer about your fellow students' writing. As you notice, most of these aren't yes or no answers. So did the opening paragraph catch your attention? Was there a part of it that could be cut? What story has the author chosen to tell? What were some of the sensory details, descriptions, or imagery that you liked? Where could the writer include more details? These aren't questions that you can half-ass, right? You know, they do require some thought and reflection. So help your fellow students, help each other get better, be honest, and answer these questions truthfully. You know, you're not going to be doing anybody any favors by blowing smoke up somebody's butt, right? By saying, this is the greatest thing I've ever read in my life. And I think you need to be published in the Wall Street Journal, right? You know, you're not doing anybody any favors by doing anything like that. Be honest, but don't be a dick at the same time, right? You know, you can be honest, give somebody good feedback, but be cordial at the same time. So again, you can get to the peer review. You can create your thread. You can copy and paste your paper in or attach your paper. I don't care. You should be able to get your paper read and reviewed. I have a little video here on why you need to take peer review seriously, right? So Grandpa's giving you a lecture here. And then finally, once all this is done, thing at the bottom, the personal narrative Dropbox, that is where you click to submit your paper. So you'll attach your file from your computer and submit it. So everything here is nicely organized into one little folder for you. It says, well, the instructions are here and what we're doing day to day, and then just follow the rest of the folder. Right? And by the 18th of September, you'll submit this paper. So I'm giving you plenty of time. I mostly give a lot of time to submit the first paper just because, for selfish reasons, I always dread starting the grading grind, right? So I like to put it off as long as I can, right? You know, but like I said, the 18th is when it's due. So questions about the blackboard before I talk about the actual paper? Speak now or hold your peace. All right, well, moving on then. We'll talk about the paper and what you're supposed to do. In a second, Zoom will pull it up. So paper one is called personal narrative. So it doesn't matter where you take this class. You can take this class almost anywhere in the country. Usually each one classes start out with this assignment, the personal narrative. Okay. So basically the gist of the personal narrative is you're going to write some kind of narrative about yourself. Right. So maybe it says in the purpose section, your purpose is to write a narrative that reveals something important about you to your audience, perhaps to yourself as well. The assignment asks you to reconsider your experience from a variety of angles. Along the way, you'll consider issues of organization, description, detail selection, point of view, and audience. In a nutshell, you're going to be writing, like I said, a story about yourself, and it should have some kind of. You shouldn't just write a paper like this just to tell a story. You know, the story should have some kind of like deeper meaning or something to take away from it. The reader should be able to take some kind of lesson away from the story. I will go more into detail about that in a second. Just so you know, this prompt I just scanned out of a textbook, right? This isn't my prompt. I just scanned it out of a textbook just because it is such a standard assignment. So as far as paper goes, you're writing a narrative, right? So it doesn't require any research or anything like that. You know, the paper is all about you, right? So this comes from your head. This should be a story that's unique to your experience. So it gives you some. So as far as talk, you know, we'll go over a sheet in a second where you can brainstorm some topics. You know, but I'll just say this. You know, you guys are no longer in high school, so you don't have to deal with you have to filter yourself kind of stuff. So I'm just going to say this, I'm opening the filter up. You can write about anything you want. Okay, I don't care. As you'll see from the examples I'm giving you, you know, people tend to write this is a nice paper to kind of open up, right? You can have some self-discovery or something like that. You know, but you can write about it. You can write about anything, right? There's no content filters. So if you can write a paper that's got rated R content, right? I don't give a shit. Okay, so you're no longer in high school where you have to deal with that nonsense, right? You can have write about anything, right? You can use whatever language you want in the paper, so long as it's relevant, right? You don't want to just throw something in just for shock value or whatever. You know, be honest. Write the paper you want to write. Don't worry about filtering yourself. You know, I will just say that, right? This is why I don't teach in a high school, because I couldn't deal with that kind of nonsense. Right? I like my students to be honest and tell what they want to tell. Right? I like to teach the way I want to teach. So no filters. Okay, write about whatever the hell you want.
So unlike high school, you can put, because I play a lot of video games, and if I write a paper like this, it's going to be me playing a video game. And before, you couldn't say anything about killing people or killing anything at all. You couldn't say the word kill in a paper.
No, I don't care. Right? If you write a personal narrative about how you want to murder your neighbor or something, I might be a little disturbed about that, right? Yeah, that might be something that I have to break confidentiality, call the cops over. But I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not bound with my confidentiality. Right? So, but tell whatever the hell you want to tell, as far as that goes. I will say this though, depending on what kind of story it is you want to tell, you do need to be aware that, of course, you are going to post your paper up for peer review. Most of you in my classes are from Wyoming counties. Most of you know each other, right? Some of you are from Mingo or Logan County, but most of you are from Wyoming. So, I mean, be honest. If you don't care about who reads your stuff, great, right? But tell whatever story it is you want to tell. If you do, I don't want you to even filter yourself for that. Like, let's say you want to write something real personal or something, but you don't want your peers to read it. That's something you can talk to me about. We can work something out. Okay. But you can tell any type of story, right? Most of the ones that I'm mostly giving you for Friday, they're pretty tragic, like depressing stories almost. So be prepared to be bummed out to some extent, right? But you can tell great, nice stories, right? Maybe something happened, maybe you learned something, you took something away from some type of experience. Maybe.
Does it matter if you know anything about the subject?
Well, I mean, you're writing about yourself, right? So I hope you know something about yourself.
No, you specifically, not me.
What do you mean?
Does it matter if the reader has no idea what you're talking about to start off with? Like if I'm talking about World of Warcraft, because that's mainly what I do.
Well, I will know your gamer lingo, okay, because I'm one myself. I've never stooped to the level of nerd to play World of Warcraft.
Hey now.
I'm sorry to tell you, but you don't have to worry about that with me, at least. If you had a 50-year-old Karen as your English professor, you might have to worry about it, right? But, I'm pretty hip and up to the times. All right, so anyway. Yes, I can't tell you how many types of stories I've had over time. Right, I've had, when I was taught at WVU, I had lots of athletes in my classes, and they would always write about how they won their championships and all this stuff. I was always just like, damn, how many champions do I teach in here? Does nobody lose a game, right? You can have I would just encourage you just to be as original as you can, right? You don't want to tell a story that's almost cliche, right? That's almost eye-rolling. Right? All of you in this class are unique people. Right? You all have your own experiences that make you who you are. So, I've actually found, because you guys know that I still teach for WVU, but I've actually found that since I've started teaching for Southern, that I get better papers from my Southern students than I do from my WVU students, just in general. Why is that? I just think people around here have lived life a little bit more, right? People, people have actually lived and seen stuff here, right? A lot of my students up there, it's not no fault of their own. They come from nice urban backgrounds and stuff, right? Strong middle class. You know, they don't see a lot of the stuff we see here. And yeah, be honest, be thorough, tell an original story. You know, don't tell something that's going to make me roll my eyes, all right? Not because I've read it a million times before. So I'm going to give you some more instruction in a second on maybe brainstorming a topic. Because right now you might be thinking, oh God, what am I going to write about? You know, I will give you some instruction on that in a second. So if you look at the top where it says organization, you know, before I move forward, let me go over this other handout really quick and stop the share of this. Pull this one up. Brace yourself, Ryan. You're going to get ready to see it again. Right. And that is creating a pact for effective communication. Okay. So this is a kind of a corny acronym, you know, that they made up at WU, right? But I think it's effective as far as helping you think about what you need to do in a particular situation. So it doesn't matter if we're writing a paper in this case, or if you're doing a speech. Right? I talk about this handout in both English and speech class. It doesn't matter what you do, you need to sort of be aware of some of these things. So the first part of the acronym is purpose. It's talking about any type of paper, but especially your narrative in this case. What is the main goal or purpose in this particular situation? Do I have any secondary purposes? Well, so what? You might ask yourself, what's the purpose of writing a personal narrative? Well, the main idea is you want to tell some kind of story that's interesting to tell. You want to tell a story using language, you know, that's interesting to read. You want to write a story that keeps the reader engaged. But the main thing is you want to write a story that the reader can take some kind of larger lesson from. That's the main thing that you need to be concerned about. So audience, who's your main audience? What are their expectations? Who else might be reading, viewing, or listening to my message? Well, anytime you write a paper in my class, you can assume your main audience is me, right? You know, however, you can also assume your audience is your peers. And so I would encourage you to write a narrative, you know, with the audience of your peers in mind. Right? Don't worry about me. Write your paper as if your fellow classmates were reading it, because they are going to be reading it. Conventions. So any type of paper, any type of assignment you have, each one of these has their own conventions. Okay, so what delivery method is best suited to the situation? What are the conventions for the medium I have chosen? Well, as far as narratives go, you know, as far as narratives go, they don't really have a lot of conventions. So I will talk more about the conventions of a narrative when we go back to the other sheet. But narratives are relatively free as far as conventions, with one major exception. And I will tell you in a second. But each paper that you're going to do in the class has its own conventions. It has its own rules. So you always kind of have to be aware of what are the larger rules that you're dealing with, that you're operating in. When we get to research papers for the last paper in the class, you know, that paper has a lot of conventions that you have to address. A lot of rules. Narratives don't have many. So conventions can be something like how you organize a paper, how you arrange it, what types of words you use, what type of tone you take. And then the last part is trouble spots. So you can, whenever you evaluate someone's piece of writing or even your own, usually your trouble spots, you run into trouble because maybe your paper isn't clear on what its purpose is. Or maybe your paper's audience gets jumbled up, right? Maybe you lose your audience somewhere. For the conventions, maybe you don't follow all the conventions that you should. Usually when you're, so this is a good way just to kind of think about writing, right? Whenever you're even evaluating someone else's writing, how do you do that? You know, you can ask yourself, the thing with English is it's a very subjective subject, right? There's something that I might read something and view it critically, and you're liable to read the same thing and love it, right? That's just the nature of a class like this. But if you look at something like this, try to think about somebody's work through something like a framework like this, it can help make it a little bit more objective, right? But this is the PACT, right? It's corny. I didn't make this up, right? But I do think it's a useful tool. Going back to the narrative sheet. So it says here organization. So I talked about conventions a second ago. And as far as narratives go, there's really no convention as far as how you want to organize it. There's lots of ways that you can organize a story. You can start from the beginning, work your way to the end, right? That's the standard. So you can start in the middle, work your way back, and go forward to the end. You can start in the end, work your way back, work back forward again. Or you can tell your narrative in a non-linear way, right? So you can maybe jump back and forth different instances of your life or something like that. So you don't have to even organize it in a beginning, middle, and end. You can kind of jump back and forth if you want. However you want to tell your story, that's how you should organize and arrange it. There's really no standard clear-cut convention for it. So I welcome it. Right? Bring it, tell your story in a unique way. You can go beginning, middle, end if you want, but experiment with it a little bit if you so choose. It says here that you can also bring in something I encourage you to do. You can bring in dialogue. Right? So if you're writing a story, you can show your characters, including yourself, talking in the story. Right? So write dialogue the way that it is that you hear it. We all speak in a dialect in this area, right? So write the dialogue in your story the way it is that we would actually speak. Don't worry about grammar or anything like that when you write dialogue. You can include things in here like that. Maybe you want to throw an image in to the paper to kind of give you a picture. Right? You can throw stuff like that in. The only thing is, if you do include something like that, it's not going to count towards your page total, right? So I'm looking for about 3 to 4 pages of words. If you include something like that in there, great, but that won't count towards your total. That's the only thing I'm going to say there.
Did you say Inogen?
Say that again.
Did you say Inogen? I didn't catch what you said there.
Did I say what?
Inogen.
No. What I said a second ago was you can include these images. That's what I said, images. You can include images, photos if you want. It won't count towards your page total. That's what I said.
Okay, makes a lot more sense
You can
than what I heard.
You can tell that this textbook is old that I scanned this out of because it says an AIM conversation with your best friend. AIM doesn't even exist anymore. AOL instant messenger. Maybe I need to scan a prompt for a more recent textbook. Now I feel old as shit. If you don't laugh, you'll cry, right? Back in my day, we used AOL Instant Messenger to talk to each other.
I don't know why I found that funny.
Yeah, so we're gonna organize it the way you want. The main convention of a narrative, though, is this part called the reflection. I said a second ago, you want to tell a story that has some kind of purpose to it. You're not telling a story just for the sake of telling one. You want to drive home some kind of moral at the end. Right? So think about it like it's an episode of Full House or something, right? You know how there's always shenanigans going on, but at the end of the episode, there's some kind of like a life lesson that you learn, right? That's kind of what this narrative is all about. You're telling a story, but usually in the conclusion, usually when it's regards to narratives, the conclusion is the most important paragraph, because this is usually where you tie everything together and drive home the point that it is that you want your story to tell. It says ultimately the purpose of the reflection is to communicate to your audience why a story is significant in your life and why you decided to tell it. All right, so I shouldn't walk away from reading a narrative and think, what did I just read? Right? I should walk away and think, okay, that's why Jarrett wrote that paper. Right? That's why Cheyenne wrote the paper that way. Right? I should have some kind of understanding of what it is you're trying to tell. That's what the reflection's for, but usually it's the conclusion paragraph. Okay? So the conclusion is the most important part of this paper. It's where everything comes together. So you want to make sure that your conclusion accomplishes that task. Everything leading up to the conclusion, tell it how you want. That conclusion is where everything comes together. Then there's a little part here about audience. We already talked about who the audience for our narratives are. So assessments, how is this going to be assessed? How am I going to grade this? So I'm going to think about how you chose focused paper among many possibilities. So you want to tell a story that you can tell within the span of 3 or 4 pages. If you go over 4, whatever, right? It's not like we're killing trees, reading everything on a computer screen. But you want to choose a story big enough that you can tell, but you don't want to choose something so big that it would take a whole book to tell the story, right? You want to choose something short and sweet enough that you can do them in 3 to 4 pages. You don't want to choose something so small that you can't squeeze 3 full pages out of it, too. So you want to make sure that you're on your game there. Conveying a personal experience in a way that's interesting and relevant. Right? Interesting and relevant are, again, 2 subjective terms. But by the time I read this, I should take away, hey, Ryan told his World of Warcraft story in a really cool way. Right? So I should be able to have an understanding of that. selecting and using descriptive detail and examples. So I'm going to talk more about descriptive detail and examples in a second. Basically, you shouldn't just tell a story. You shouldn't just be like, this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. That's a boring way to tell a story. Usually a good narrative will stop and smell the roses. Right? You will stop and smelling the roses. And you will you'll take time and paint a picture for the reader using words, right? Describe the room you're in, or describe where you were outside in the narrative, where the narrative's taking place. Stop and smell the roses, right? Appeal to our senses, sights, smells, tastes. Again, more on that in a second, but you don't want to do the paper and that this happened, this happened, this happened. Like, stop and smell the roses. That's usually whenever I give feedback on these. That's one of my most common criticisms. You don't really describe things enough. Stop and smell the roses. So you want to demonstrate originality and initiative, right? Choose something unique. Demonstrate genuine progress and draft the drafts. You'll at least have 2 drafts. First copy for peer review, and then the draft you submit to me. And there might even be a 3rd draft after that if you get a grade that you didn't like and you choose to revise it, right? So there's going to be multiple drafts involved where you keep improving on your work. You want to make sure your work's proofread and grammatically correct for the most part. Because as far as this type of thing goes, I never know what I'm going to expect until I get them. You know, but on your first draft, at least, you shouldn't worry about that type of thing. Get it down first. Get your story down, and then you can go back and polish that type of stuff later. And then it says meeting the length requirement. Don't crap your pants. It's not 5 to 6. It's 3 to 4 pages. That's how long I like these narratives to be. About 3 to 4 pages. So before I move on to talking about descriptive detail, questions, comments, concerns about the narrative, anything I can address at this point? Everything clear? Give me the thumbs up reaction if you don't want to talk.
I'm gonna fail this class. That's all I gotta say.
Oh, I severely doubt that. Cheyenne and Jarrett, thumbs up. Caleb Braxton, thumbs ups. All right. Good deal. Let me see. There's a bunch of handouts I need to talk about. Let's do the brainstorming handout first. This is up on our module for you. This is something, I'm not requiring you to do a post on it or whatever. This is something optional that I give that might help you out. But this is an activity from a textbook, that I used when doing this class before. But if maybe the next couple of days, if you struggle to come up with a topic for this, maybe do one of these prompts from this handout, and that might give you some ideas about something to do. But if you do something like this, it's a pre-writing exercise, right? Just pre-write. Whenever you pre-write, just get a pen and paper and just go crazy, right? Don't worry about anything else. It helps you brainstorm. The brainstorming prompt that I gave, that the sheet has, the first one, choose 3 distinctly separate time periods in your life Begin each section with "I am blank years old" and free write from there for 10 minutes. Right? It says an alternative is to think of 3 songs or 3 photographs from 3 distinctly time periods in your life. So you can do something like that too. So if you do this as a brainstorm, usually, or even if you even construct your narrative in this way, you might think about it like, what are 3 or 4 major moments in your life might have defined who you are today? So what happened in your life, Ron, that made you Ron? Right? What are 3 or 4 moments that define who you are? Right? That's kind of what this 3 moments prompt does. So if you're struggling to come up with a topic, this is a good one to do. This one says tell a story with 3 readers in mind. So this helps you kind of tailor for an audience. Tell the same brief story, but with 3 readers in mind. This last one says choose one important life event that has had an impact on your present view of life in general. Might be something you were able to give or teach someone else, a moment when you failed but moving on, the loss of someone special to you, a lesson you learned or a skill you mastered, an unexpected gift you received, a goal you achieved, or some other surprising circumstance. Right? There's everybody has their own stories to tell in this regard. So just, again, if you're struggling to find a topic, just write a couple of paragraphs on a piece of paper or something, and that will help you think about what it is you want to do. So that is up on the module for you if you want to reference it again later. If you struggle to come up with a topic, use that. It can only help. The next one I'm going over is second. Sure, I can pull it up on Zoom. Note on what we call figurative language. So I said a second ago, you want to stop and smell the roses and describe things the way they are. Right. So to do good description, you want good imagery in your writing. You want to paint a picture, a portrait for your audience with words. To do that, usually you want to kind of appeal to the reader's senses. Excuse me. So, sight, smells, tastes, sounds, touches. The more you can appeal to your reader's senses in describing a scene or something like that, usually the more interesting and engaging your writing is. Those sights, the tiny red ant climbed up the broken twig. You can kind of imagine an ant climbing up a twig. The sweet smell of freshly baked apple pie filled the air. All right, everybody knows what apple pie smells like, fresh out of the oven. Taste, one bite of the sour lemon caused my lips to pucker. Everybody's bit into a lemon before. You know what that feels like. The car squeaked every time I hit a bump in the road. So you can kind of imagine that squeak of brakes or something like that. Touches, the sharp edge of the paper cut my finger and made it sting. That's a very unique feeling with touch. So you want to describe things and appeal to the reader's senses. Right? You don't want to just say, this happened, this happened, this happened. You want to stop and appeal to the reader's senses, paint a portrait of whatever setting it is that you're in. That's how you make this writing interesting and not boring. We also have, there's also some other sort of linguistic devices that you can use to make your writing better. First one's called personification. This is when you describe something that's not human and give it human traits. So as we see here, there's nothing more, just as far as personification goes, you see a sun smiling and waving at you. So a sentence like, the sun smiled at me as we drove by. Right? A sun's a ball of gas. It doesn't smile, right? But it's giving the sun a human quality. You know, that makes you, sort of shows, well, it was a nice sunny day. The sun smiled at me as we drove by. So that's giving us, the dog winked at me. That's a common one. The dog winked at me. Well, dogs don't wink, right? That's, you know, it's anatomy, with their anatomy, they can't, right? That's just not possible. You know, but that's an expression, right? The dog winked at me. So this is personification, giving something not human trait. So if you can throw a sentence or two like that in here, it makes your writing interesting and vivid. Some other devices, we have what's called onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia. Try saying that over and over. Onomatopoeia without tongue twisting yourself. But the onomatopoeia is just this pure sound, a pure sound. And it's usually with an exclamation mark. So the best way to think about onomatopoeia is think about the old 1960s Batman cartoon, right? Batman would hit somebody and would go whap, thud, crash, snap. You know, you've seen the 1960s Batman show with Adam West, right? You know exactly what I'm talking about. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, look it up on YouTube after class. That's what onomatopoeia is. It's just a pure sound. Bang, snap, crack, whip. All right. Usually it's with the exclamation mark. Hyperbole. Hyperbole is an over-exaggeration. I was so hungry I could have eaten a horse. Well, that's an overly exaggerated phrase. No one's so hungry that they can eat a whole horse. All right, no one's ever that hungry. I would hope not, at least. All right, so you see what I mean here. That's an exaggeration. Everybody uses these in your day. You all use these in your daily life. You all exaggerate for effect. That's hyperbole. Alliteration. Alliteration is when you repeat the same sound, the consonant sound, to start a word several times over in your sentence. So we have made a marvelous meal. Well, you see that in the sentence, it starts with the consonant M sound, the M sound, 4 times. Made a marvelous meal. And so each one of those words starts with that M sound. That's what alliteration is. You start multiple words in the sentence, repeat the same sound, initial sound. But it has to be a consonant sound. It can't be an A-E-I-O-U sound. It can't be a vowel sound. It has to be a consonant. Cliches. You want to avoid cliches. Cliches are something you don't want to have in here. So we get laughter is the best medicine. Cliches are actually something you want to avoid. I have another handout in a second to talk about cliches. But just to skip through some of these other ones real quick. Idioms. He has a chip on his shoulder, right? That's like an expression. Paradox, jumbo shrimp. Well, shrimp can't be jumbo, right? They're not big creatures. Some shrimp are slightly more bite-sized than others, right? That's why they call them jumbo. But that's a paradox because a shrimp can't be jumbo, right? A shrimp's not gigantic. This is here mostly for your benefits. Similes and metaphors. It's great. If you can use similes and metaphors in your paper, I will be quite happy. The difference between a simile and a metaphor. A simile is when you say something is like something else. So usually in a sentence, you'll even use the word like. You'll say like or as if. So that's different from a metaphor. In a metaphor, you're saying something is something else. Well, so our little picture here, you're a weasel. Well, I'm like one. So being an actual weasel, that's a metaphor. Saying you're like a weasel, that's a simile. Right? So there's a difference between the two. So that if you can have expressions like these in your papers, that's great. That's what I'm looking for as far as description and imagery and things like that. Again, appeal to your senses. Use some of these devices I just covered. Use metaphors and similes. If you can do that, then your writing is going to be good. Let's cover this last handout that I have on figurative language. Not figurative language. Just a second. Avoiding cliches. So a cliche is these overly overdone expressions that are in our language. These are expressions that's been used so many times that they've kind of lost meaning. Like some of these cliches might have had an original meaning that's been lost over time. But these are these eye roller phrases that you've probably read or said 100,000 times before. So I'll move back up to this first page. So it says here, what's actually bad about cliches? So give me just a second.
Someone has the cops.
Yeah, it's the sound of living in Beckley, right? Always police sirens going off. Don't move to Beckley. I'll just tell you guys that. It's not always some kind of crazy shit going on out here. You know, I could tell you lots of stories about all the tragedies that have happened to me. But anyway, moving on. So what's bad about cliches? So whenever you do use cliches, you could be using something better than them. Right? Cliches are mostly there for filler. It says here, imagine that you're reading an application letter. Right? You read these two different personal statements. This first one says, I'm a people person, so I'm certain to get along well with new people in a strange country. I know how to adapt because I'm a jack of all trades. I'm also prepared to deal with adversity and learn from challenges because I know that every cloud has a silver lining. That's just almost painful to read for me to read aloud, just because there's so many cliches in this 3 sentences. I'm a people person. I know how to adapt because I'm a jack of all trades. I'm ready to deal with adversity and learn from challenges. Every cloud has a silver lining. Almost that whole thing is a major cliche. So if you're using a cliche, you're not saying anything specific or interesting. Compare that to this next statement. I'm not going to read it all, but in this example, this person actually gives some specific examples for why they're a good fit for the school. Right? They're not giving these cliche statements. So avoiding cliches at all costs. That's pretty much what I'm telling you. So we have some examples here. You know, whenever you write, so some cliches that I often see in academic writing, they'll say something like, in modern society or in today's society, this is a big problem. And that's a very common sort of cliche. Throughout history, this has been a problem. Or from the dawn of man, this has been a problem. If you're taking a history class here, never use those expressions, as it makes history teachers roll their eyes. Like, oh God, is this what I signed up for? I did not sign up to read from the dawn of man sentences. Maybe I should rethink my life choices. Right? Don't make your history professor rethink their life choice. We see here, there's other ones. Good things come to those who wait. Every cloud has a silver lining. Little did I know. I learned more from them than they did from me. Every rose has a thorn. The time of my life. In the nick of time, opposites attract. You win some, you lose some. Easy come, easy go. And then if we go back up to the top, I compiled sort of a list together. All that glitters isn't gold. Don't get your knickers in a twist. Or panties is probably the more modern phrase. Don't get your panties in a twist. All for one and one for all. Kiss and make up. He has his tail between his legs. They lived happily ever after. Cat got your tongue. Read between the lines. Someone woke up on the wrong side of the bed. We're not laughing at you. We're laughing with you. No, actually, we're laughing at you. Actions speak louder than words. The grass is greener on the other side. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Can't judge a book by its cover. It sounds like I'm reading the angsty Facebook statuses when I'm reading these aloud, right? It sounds like somebody broke up with their boyfriend and they posted some angsty cliches. That's what it sounds like. It makes me roll my eyes, right? Can't please everyone. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Love is blind. Ignorant is bliss. There's no time like the present. Better safe than sorry. Cliches that describe time. Only time will tell. In the nick of time. Lost track of time. It's lasted an eternity. Just a matter of time. Wasted time. Time flies in a jiffy. I had the time of my life. This event happened at the speed of light. Cliches that describe people. This guy's as old as the hills. He's fit as a fiddle. He doesn't have a care in the world. He's a diamond in the rough. Brave as a lion, weak as a kitten, has nerves of steel. This person's ugly as sin. So these are all cliches. The main gist to take away here is don't use them. If you do use them, better figure that I will probably call you out on it. Okay. So that's it mostly for the narrative discussion. I would want to have a discussion about one other thing today before I let you guys go. But that involves grammar for your grammar quiz. But anything I can address at the moment? I just rambled for about narratives for a whole hour and 15 minutes. Right, so did I lose you somewhere along the way? Are you guys still feeling good about what it is you need to do?
Yeah, just go ahead and repeat all of that.
That's what the video is for, right? That's the beauty. That's the beauty of these Zoom classes, right? There's a whole archive of what I've said. Anything in particular that I can address before I move on?
So we absolutely cannot use cliches in any form of the matter.
Well, there's an exception to that, right? Let's say for instance that you don't use cliches through the whole paper. Maybe you get to the conclusion where you're trying to drive home a point. Well, using a cliche there might kind of help you do that. Use them sparingly. I'll just say that. Use them sparingly. I don't want to see a whole paper covered in them, but if you use them here and there, then that will help your writing. Okay.
So you're telling me to write my paper with only cliches and nothing else.
That's not what I'm saying. If you do that, your paper will come back in a sea of red font. Right? You don't want a sea of red font coming back at you. Right, so what else? Anything I can address at the moment? So as far as the narratives writing goes, once you read some, I think once you read some of these student essays I've given you, you read some of these sort of professional narratives, reading some of these narratives I've given you will give you a good idea as far as what it is you need to do. So the readings for Friday and the discussion posts, I hope that gives you some idea as far as what you want to do as well. Camera, turn to you, Cheyenne. You have a question? Or is that just the camera being weird?
I think it was the camera being weird.
All right. I picked up some background noise or something.
Maybe. My internet's stupid. It went out earlier and I had to rejoin.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Well, luckily, you'll have the video after, so you should see what you missed. This whole Zoom setup is weird. I have a guy in another class who every time he speaks, it kicks him off. I have no idea what that's about. I'm glad he's not in speech class. That would be really bad. All right, so if there's no further questions, I'll cover the grammar lesson, and then we'll call it a day. So last week's grammar lesson, the one that was on the, again, watch that if you haven't yet. It's on combining sentences with commas correctly. That's the video that I had for last week. That's the most common sort of error that you can encounter. But what I want to talk about today is point of view, and especially pronouns and point of view. Like what types of points of view are acceptable in different sorts of classes. So you have the first person point of view, second person, the third person. So your first person pronouns for singular and plural usually have I and we. Second person is you or you all. You all is the plural. right? Or y'all. We get picked on for saying y'all in Appalachian dialect, right? But that's actually the correct second person plural. The third person's he, she, it, or they. So I'm giving you this lesson because it's an important lesson to get early on in a class like this, because this lesson also helps you in your other classes, not just mine. So depending on what kind of circumstance you're in, these are one or two of these are relevant. So it depends on the conventions. So if, let's say that I'll just say for first person, I or we. So I might ask yourselves, what types of classes would you use these? Well, the first person's is good often in a class like English. Including personal narrative papers. So if you write your personal narrative paper, it'll be kind of weird if you don't use the first person, because you're talking about yourself. So how can you talk about yourself without using the first person? If Jared writes this paper, right, and refers to himself as Jared in the whole paper, right, I would think something's up, right? That's a little odd. So depending on the convention of whatever paper it is, oftentimes in a class like English, the first person is an acceptable pronoun to use. Sometimes you might have had teachers in your past who have told you never to use the first person, right? That's bad advice. You can use it sometimes, including in a narrative. You can even use them in research papers often if you want. But you sometimes do deal with the sticklers who are like, no, never use it, right? And for the most part, it is conventional to use in a class like English. The third person, I'll move to the second person in a second. Third person, most classes and situations, this is the most acceptable. Especially the sciences and social sciences. So most of the time, I'm talking more about your other classes at this point. Most of the time, especially if you're writing something for a science course or even a social science course like psychology or sociology, you always want to make sure your pronouns stick to the third person. You never want to use a first person pronoun in a class like anatomy or physical science or psychology or sociology. Main reason why is it's just not conventions. All those disciplines like to maintain some type of level of objectivity, right? And if you use those first person pronouns, it takes away from the objectivity of whatever it is you're writing about. That makes it subjective. Well, the reason why first person is acceptable in English is literature analysis and things like that. That is a subjective discipline. Whereas something like psychology, sociology, all the physics, chemistry, all of those disciplines like to maintain some level of objectivity. You shouldn't be influencing whatever the science is. So that's why you should never use anything but third person in those other types of classes like science and social science. And if you do, all science teachers can especially be very picky about this kind of thing. If you include them in there, they will mark you down heavily. And he said that if you're taking something sciencey, I'm guessing most of you are. Most of our students at Southern are in something science related. But if you're taking something like that, never use first person. Always use the third. The second person, you all, never acceptable. Okay? It doesn't matter what class, what discipline you're writing for, never want to use the second person to directly address the reader in any type of academic writing. Okay? There's one exception to this, just one. So let's say for instance, in something like the narrative, you spend the whole paper, you follow the rules, you don't use any second person pronouns. Maybe you get that conclusion paragraph. That conclusion paragraph would be a good place where you might actually want to directly address the reader. You want the reader to take something away from your story, right? So something like a conclusion paragraph, that's a case where you show that you know the rules because you haven't broke them already. So you're showing the reader this is where you know the rules and you're choosing to break them in this case. That's a case where it's okay to use the second person, when you've shown that you know the rules and you're clever enough to show that you can break them. Okay. But again, so for the most part, first person is acceptable sometimes. Second person's almost never acceptable. Third person, acceptable in almost every situation, but not in a personal narrative, because it would be weird if you refer to yourself in the third person. Questions about this? Have I given you advice that other teachers have, or did I contradict the former teacher that you might have had about point of view? I do know high school teachers like to tell you never to use anything but the third. I do know that. Okay. So that's a lesson for you, and that'll be on your quiz next week on top of the sentence combining stuff. Well, without further ado, that should be enough for class today. So we will call it at that if none of you have anything else to add. And we'll see you all next week. And good luck with your reading and coming up with your narrative, maybe early writing on it. Good luck with all of that. We'll see you guys next week.